I will text you versus trying to make sure that I don't like put out like an expletive yikes over chat. I will text you and we can work through anything that might be glitchy that way.
Okay, I'm gonna bring my phone out and actually put it next to me then, where I'm gonna see it. I had put it on silent, but I'll put the sound up so I'll hear if you text me.
Okay.
And hopefully no one else texts me.
That seemed to work well yesterday. Not that I think we just had one little like question or something happened. So with Colleen and the analyst. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now until 9.
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, it says my connection's unstable, so I'm trying to figure it out so it can be smooth.
Good morning, everyone. It is 9 o'clock and we have some participants that are coming in. We'll give this till about 9:01. Can participants, Salita Day out there, can you still see the slide deck? Is that still up on the screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Fantastic. As you're coming in, if you can say hi in the chat, where are you from, kind of what role you serve, as we're just kind of coming in and relaxing. Maybe take a couple of deep breaths. Hey, Lynette, good to see you. And James, awesome. If this is your first day joining us, if you'll share that, if this is day 2 for you and you're kind of family now, please share that. We'd love to know. Awesome, we've got some day 2s. Hi, Caitlin, thank you for sharing. We've got a wonderful intern from the Bell Next Door. Oh, wow, you guys are exciting. This is awesome. Great energy. So it's about 9:01. I want to be mindful of people's time. And I think we're going to go ahead and kick this off with our welcome. And thank you to everyone for joining us for day 2 of our Youth Experiencing Homelessness kind of awareness and workshopping that we're doing this week as a wonderful collaboration. I'm Dawn Squire. I work for Contact Helpline, PA 211. That's kind of my day job that keeps me from running with biker gangs and keeps me off the streets. I also volunteer with a wonderful organization called Cornerstone Youth Home that is truly a restorative and collaborative project about to open its doors. So I'm right there in the community, working hard with people to build bridges, and just so thankful that everybody is here this morning. I'll kind of run through some housekeeping. We've got people still coming on. This is wonderful. The number keeps on ticking up and up, and I'm getting more and more nervous. So this is being recorded, and letting you know that as you log on, you'll only be able to see the chat from when it started. So we will post some things kind of repeatedly to make sure that everybody's included, like the website and any kind of relevant information. We have a fantastic team here today. If you are on the correct flight, you are on the flight that's hopefully making some connections between healthy housing and healthy students. And that's really what we want to start start the conversation, continue it. Yesterday, day one, we had an amazing keynote speaker with Rebecca. She is just an incredible warrior in the fight against poverty, and she is someone who, it's not trite to say, was absolutely in the trenches, and her resiliency and connection to community made all the difference. So if you were not able to be there for day one, that video is posted on the Coalition for Homelessness, the York County Coalition for Homelessness. It will be on our website, and I encourage you to take a look at that. It's 2 hours, it's worth every minute, and share that in community. Today we have the amazing Reverend Mike Langle, who will be moderating for us. We have Shanice Brown. You talk about a warrior, and just such a hero to me. I'm not going to get started. She will be sharing. We have Annie Clark, who has stepped up like the incredible person that she is, to share more about that connection between health, equity, and housing equity. We have Joy Santiago, who will be joining us via video, and then her partner in crime, Kim Krynock, her operations director from the York Area Housing Group. So we have a wonderful team that is sharing, and then we have our Lauren Marshall from CCBH. She's monitoring the chat. And again, for those of you that are joining us for the first time today, that will be the interaction from the attendees. You'll share in the chat, and then when we see questions, Lauren will pose them via chat, and then after each segment, we'll take time to have some interactions. Let me go through my checklist. So I just want to kind of reiterate what I've noticed in community and how thankful I am that as we continue and nurture these conversations, it's about strength and resiliency. And what I've noticed is that as individuals, as we embrace this concept that we are born with strengths that need to be nurtured, I am seeing an emergence and blossoming of a community that's resilient. And I want to honor that and thank you all for participating today in creating a more resilient community. I also want to share that this is the first time we're doing this, and it absolutely reflects resiliency. It's a little messy. We've had to be very flexible. We've pivoted more times than a ballerina. And so I thank you for grace as we embark on today's session. And with all of that, I'm going to turn off my camera and turn it over to Reverend Mike Langle, who, if there is no finer accolade, when Carla Christopher was not able to join us, he is who she turned to take over the role of moderator, and that just speaks volumes for just the kind of confidence that that I have in Reverend Mike to be able to direct us today. Lauren, have I forgotten anything?
This event is being recorded and can be shared on, viewed on Facebook and shared. I did put the links in the chat as well as the website for upcoming sessions this week.
And away we go.
Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and I wanted to thank everyone who had a hand in helping to bring this together. I also bring greetings from Reverend Carla Christopher, who she did really regret not being able to be here, and so I was grateful and honored to be asked to step in on her behalf, and I hope to be able to live up to the faith that she has entrusted to me with this. So I bring greetings. At the moment, I'm currently in Coatesville, PA, where my wife and I are living. I grew up in Mechanicsburg, PA, and actually have spent most of my life here in Pennsylvania, aside from a year in South Africa and a year, 3 years in Massachusetts, where I was serving my first call. I'm a Lutheran pastor as well, and I'm currently on leave from serving a congregation because I've shifted my focus full-time to addressing the issues of housing and homelessness. This interest in particular came about because while I was serving the congregation in Massachusetts, I helped found a community coalition to address the issues of housing and homelessness in our area, because we were in a small town about maybe 10 minutes from a large city. And so it wasn't really well coordinated or known what kind of resources were available for people that were experiencing homelessness. And so when a couple came to me asking for help, as I was walking alongside them in their journey to try and discover help find some way to help them resolve their situation, we realized we needed to start better coordinating our efforts and sharing our efforts with one another, and building each other up. And that work really ignited a passion in me for housing and homelessness, and trying to address that as much as possible. And so when I ended up leaving the congregation where I was serving, I shifted my focus full-time to work on addressing housing and homelessness. I'm currently working about 30 hours a week with an organization called Aklamo Family Centers in Norristown, PA. And I'm working as a housing counselor. The Montgomery County received CARES Act funds directly from the federal government, and they implemented a program in September called Emergency Rent and Utility Coalition, which is part of their Your Way Home homelessness prevention program. And they are allowing us, and we're helping administer, along with three other nonprofits, a grant program where we're able to provide aid of about up to $1,500 a month for up to 6 months, a combination of rent and utilities for people that have fallen behind in some way, shape, or form because of COVID. And so that program runs through December. And through that work, between the work with the community coalition in Massachusetts, as well as the work as a housing counselor, I've really encountered a lot of the ways that the system itself, it really favors those that have the time and resources to understand it, which means that if you are working, or you're working poor, or anything happens like that, you don't tend to have as much time to get to understand it, whether that's the justice system, whether that is the housing system. Even with the Centers for Disease Control's nationwide moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent, I would say probably 10 to 15% at this point of the clients that I'm working with are in some stage of the eviction process, even despite those nationwide orders. And there's some structural issues there, but a lot of it has to do with, you have to know about the eviction moratorium, and you have to then also know the steps that you have to take in order to actually qualify under it. And even then, the most recent interpretation in the courts is that they can still allow proceedings to go even up to and including issuing an order for possession, and it would just be that the constables can't lock you out of the house. So there's a lot structurally to talk about. There's a lot of intersectionality between racial, economic, and gender justice issues. And what we're going to be focusing here on this morning is first off, a recognition that the housing crisis and issues of homelessness, they were a deep issue in our country before the pandemic. The pandemic has simply exacerbated and really shown a spotlight on the issues. And so we're here to come around a sub portion, I guess, in a lot of ways. We're going to be focusing especially on housing displacement and the impacts that that has on people's lives, especially from a health and outcomes perspective. But also, we're going to take some time here in about a minute or so to hear from Shanice, to hear her story. And we want to honor that story and her time with us to hear directly from her and the voice that she brings to the conversation. I've heard a lot of glowing remarks already with regards to the voice that she offers us. So after her introduction and her presentation, we're going to take a pause and allow some time for some conversation with her, some interaction. So one thing for those in the chat that I would recommend is on the chat bar, if you notice along the bottom of the screen, there's a place to hit chat. There should be a drop-down menu that indicates who you are putting the chat to. I strongly recommend you click that and select all panelists and attendees. This way, you can continue to write comments in the chat, and everyone can see the comments that you're putting. There can be some hopefully robust conversation in the chat, and even while Shanice is presenting and the rest of us are presenting, and I know that Lauren is going to be keeping an eye on the chat, and when it gets to that point, she'll help interject some of the conversation. But with that, I don't want to take up any more time on myself, and I'd like to turn our panel over to Shanice, who has a story and to share with us. And Shanice, thank you.
Thank you so much. First, I really appreciate being here and being included in the conversation. I'm trying to control myself just because listening to you speak, I don't know why, but for some reason now I'm kind of emotional because all the memories are coming back, and it kind of reminds me that the things you go through, even though you move forward in them, they never leave, just because it becomes a part of you as a person. And I definitely feel as though this experience has molded me into the kind of person that doesn't really experience their emotions on their sleeves as much, but when it happens very strong. So once again, I appreciate being here and for being part of this conversation. So a little bit about me. I'm from York, PA. I have moved between Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I've also lived in Philadelphia, where my father is from. And my perspective of homelessness was living under a bridge, living on the street, things like that that are very visible. And it wasn't actually brought to my attention that I had experienced homelessness until I got to high school. My family, I am the oldest of three. I have a 14-year-old brother and a just turned 12-year-old sister. So my babies are becoming teenagers, and I don't know what to do with myself. But I'm the oldest, and I have my parents, and I can definitely say that we've really become a very strong unit. And what I mean by that is that right now we are currently all battling COVID. We just got diagnosed and tested positive last week. So we've been in the mindset of recovering, and it hit all of us differently. My siblings are asymptomatic, so they actually don't have symptoms right now, but my parents and I do. So I kind of feel like because of everything that we've gone through together, we feel like, okay, we've gone through all of that, we can tackle this. And we really have to support and lean on each other just like we did before. But the difference is this time going through something, we're in a house. And that's something to be grateful for, because at least then we can all be in our own separate sections, but we can still all be together. And going from being in one room together to being in a house together, even though we're still addicted to each other, we're constantly around each other, it is a very big difference. And I think about people who may be battling COVID and don't have a home, don't have a house, or don't have a family to lean on. So the spectrum varies, and it looks very different in a lot of different people's eyes. But for me, I have been in experiences where I have lived with family members or friends, with my entire family. And I've also lived in a motel room with my family. And if there's one thing that we've experienced was that when we first became homeless was my mother looked for shelters, but there were either shelters who wouldn't take a full family, or they would only take the mother and the children and would not shelter the father. And that kind of concerned me because my mother, it's not a single family household. It is a two parent household. And I already know that people tend to have discrepancies about Black families and actually having a father figure. So my mom refused to go anywhere that wouldn't take my father, because we are a unit, we are one family, so we all have to go through this together, and she wasn't going to leave him behind. So originally we did end up living in an apartment after we moved back here from Philadelphia, and it was going fine. But our landlord was a really big slumlord. All we've ever had were slumlords. Every single one of them. We've never, in my 22 years of life, never had a good landlord. And this one put us out of our apartment 2 weeks before Christmas. That was probably the biggest emotional toll. We've lived with family and people before then, and we've also learned about how people tend to get wary of living with a family of five, even if they chose to house them. You know, even if they offered, "Hey, I want to open my home to you guys as long as you need." Eventually, the generosity ran out because they were tired of having their space taken up with by a family of five, even though we did our best to contribute. So the motel room ended up being our last resort because my parents refused to live with anybody else ever again after that experience. And it was a very emotional time. It was very difficult because both my siblings are both autistic, but they're both very high on the spectrum because my parents worked with them in their development. So they're very smart, they're very cognitively aware, but my sister still needed a little bit extra help. So my sister would have to go on a van in the morning, and my brother went to Logos Academy at the time. So my parents both worked the same shift. They would leave around like 6 o'clock in the morning to work the same shift together. And then that would leave me to take care of my siblings, get them dressed, get them breakfast, and then get them off to school. So I would have to wait for my sister's van to get to the building. I would put her on the van, and then I would walk my brother to school, and then I would go to school. So because of that, that made me late to school every single day. I barely missed days, but I did either have to leave early for my brother to get him from an early dismissal, or I would have to be late every day so I can get him to school on time. So I guess that was kind of my sacrifice, I guess you can say. And I see a couple of familiar organizations here, and one of them that I want to point out is the York County Youth Court Alliance. I was actually a member of the Youth Court Alliance since my freshman year of high school, all the way up to my senior year when I was president. And so throughout this time, of course, as y'all probably already know, youth court deals with truancy prevention, actually. So it's kind of ironic to have a member who's late to school every day when you have to have court cases for students in order for them to avoid the fines and things like that. So it was kind of ironic for me. But I told them about my situation, and they gave me such a wonderful support system. As a matter of fact, the school district itself of York gave me a very strong support system. And they would come by and they would give my family food, and they would give us different resources that we needed. And that was really made us super, super grateful to have that kind of support, because it is difficult. And even when Christmas came around, and my parents were so upset because they couldn't give us the Christmas that we wanted. We couldn't have the tree, we couldn't have all the presents. But my siblings and I, we never complained. And that's my parents now. They say that's why we want to give y'all the world, because y'all never complained about not getting the things that you wanted. But for us, it was like we've been through a lot of things, and not getting gifts doesn't really mean anything when at least we're still together. That's kind of what we grew up on. And a lot of people, when they go through things like that, they tend to act out differently. Some people, have a lot of negative behavior in school. They'll act out. Some people won't show up to school at all. But I'm a nerd. So if anything else, it kind of made me dive more into my academics and dive more into my clubs. So I wouldn't even leave school until maybe like 8 o'clock at night, being in clubs and doing things. And because I prided myself on my GPA, and so did my siblings. My parents always advocated education for us, and I was working towards going to college. So I really didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize that. So I really just put myself more into school, and that's kind of what got me by, to keep me from getting as depressed as I could have been, because I was. Because it's embarrassing to say that you're living out of a motel room and the best meal of the day is your school lunch, which you already don't really like that much, but but it's the only food that you've gotten that wasn't out of a microwave. You know what I mean? And microwaves ruin everything. Oh, they ruin such good food when that's all you have. So, I got to the point where, I was excited to go to school because that was a meal that I could eat that wasn't out of a microwave and that I couldn't be disgusted by. Just because, not because the food, not because it was bad. It's just that it's just not healthy. You know what I mean? And it's just not a good experience to have. And so, I didn't tell anybody for a long time where I was living, because I didn't want to be embarrassed about it. And I was. So I did my best to hide it. But after a while, you have to own the truth that you have and what you're given. And we lived in a motel room for 10 months straight. And my parents tried so hard. They applied everywhere. They went to everybody, but they assumed that because we were in a motel room that we couldn't afford rent, which actually, when you're paying weekly for months to live in a motel room, it is not cheap. you you have to be able to sustain yourself financially to be able to live in that situation for such a long period of time. But once we finally did get the house, I actually met certain people. Lisa Albright, she's a really huge mentor of mine, and she works with the school district, and I actually met her through her giving us furniture for our house when we moved in. Which was also a beautiful experience. And she's been my go-to and my mentor ever since. And living here was rough at first as well. Once again, we have a slumlord, so we didn't have water the first month we lived here, and she didn't care. So we had to do the best that we could, bathing and having drinking water and stuff like that, because she didn't care. And my mother said, how would you feel if you had your family living here and you could only live on the first floor and you don't have any water? And there was no empathy. So even being here was kind of rough starting off, but we were happy to be able to live in a house and to have somewhere to be. But even though it's a house, it's not a home. To me, a home is something that you feel. It's somewhere that you can let your guard down, somewhere you can be comfortable, somewhere that you can really build from what you have. And I feel like home is a feeling. And even though I don't feel that here, I am very grateful to have a place that I can say that, this is my house. We've lived here for over 5 years now, and we're stable. We have the necessities, and it makes you really appreciate what you have. We have a stove. I'm excited for Thanksgiving and Christmas and having amazing meals out of the oven. I'm happy for it every year, and I'm very appreciative. And it could have torn my family apart being in that situation because my parents were very stressed out. They wanted to give us the best, and the fact that they couldn't was really difficult on them. So for me, I had to really step up and try to be the foundation for my family to keep us together, because it's very easy for people to fall apart or to break up. And my parents didn't want that to happen, and I didn't want that to happen. So I had to swallow a lot of pride and a lot of emotions. So now it's kind of like I'm a very strong person, but it kind of makes you a little too strong, because then it's very hard for you to let your guard down and to feel those emotions or allow yourself to, because you want to look out for your family. So that's one of the tolls it took on me, was being a little too strong, but nonetheless, it's definitely built me from the person that I was to who I am now. So progress report now, I'm actually wearing my shirt. I did get a full scholarship to Lincoln University. This is my senior year, so I graduate in May, which I'm very excited about. And I'm currently working on applications to graduate school, if I'm going, because that is a lot of money, and I'm like being debt free. So, but as of right now, I am looking to go. And I just make myself as involved as I possibly can on campus. Currently I'm president of 2 organizations, and that is very stressful, having to run 2 organizations virtually. And we are home, but I'm working it out, and I'm doing the best that I can. And my family has become very, very strong. And like I said, even though we're battling COVID right now, we're working it out, and every day is different. But we work the best that we can to get to where we need to be. My mom is currently, she just graduated from beauty school as a cosmetologist, and my father is actually a licensed health inspector. So they both went to school at the same time, and this past year they both got their certifications and licenses. So I'm very proud of both of them. And I have siblings in middle school, and I'm scared. So, but nonetheless, I love them very much. So we're doing very, very great. And I'll be able to share my story in different places. I went to the ECHIA 2017. Let me start getting it's the Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness. I spoke at the regional conference, and then I went to the national conference in Maine. And I actually went to Argentina last year for 2 months to study abroad. I got a scholarship to go, and I saw the homelessness there, and it was very, very I won't say traumatizing, but just families, full families on mattresses on the street. And it reminded me of just how that felt. And more. So it made me realize that homelessness is not just a United States thing. It is a a global thing. It looks very different in many different places, but nonetheless, it is something that is a universal language that everybody can understand and connect with, no matter where you are. So it definitely keeps me grounded and down to earth. That's my spiel.
Well, Shanice, thank you very much for sharing. What I'd like to do now is I've been seeing in chat there's a lot of positive affirmations about your story. I would like to open this up to a little bit more conversation and dialogue. And so as I do see a question there. If the panelists that are here too have some questions, we'll interject for a few moments here just to honor your time with us, and then we'll continue to move on. And you're welcome to stay or go as you need, because you said you're. I understand you're either currently missing a class or you have a class that's coming up very soon that you'll need to get attending to. So we want to honor your time and thank you for sharing your story. Question from chat that I saw. From Arlene. Is she the first one that actually wrote a question, Lauren?
Yes, it looks like Arlene asked, what would you say was the first resource that came to your family that helped you move out from the hotel?
As far as moving out, that was really all my parents, I have to say. Someone was just willing to take the chance on us to let us move in, because my parents had been trying to save money so that they could afford to move us out. But as far as resources, when we moved out, Mrs. Albright and actually York High itself, I believe it was mentors at York High in general, they heard about our situation and they donated the furniture for us to be able to use for the house. And she actually just gave us a stove too, not too long ago. Our stove broke, and then she contributed that as well. So I would say that as far as moving out itself, that was pretty much entirely my parents. We had gotten resources while we were there as far as food. Communities and schools was actually a really big resource. They let me raid there for clothes and food. They always let me raid in there and get what I needed. So communities and schools was definitely a really big contribution for us throughout our stay there. So I would definitely say that was a huge one.
And I think it's worth, for sure, saying and vocalizing out loud some of the words that people are attributing to you, which are resilient, humble, resourceful, full of good morals. Don't make me cry, Shanice. Let's keep it together, girl. A lot of empathy criers on this call. But also self-aware, positive, inspirational, a strong role model, strong, resilient in the face of adversity, and speaking articulately without hate or anger. So I just applaud you. It's
Yes.
good to hear those things.
It definitely is. I'm having a tough time right now, so I really needed the positive energy, because I'm physically and mentally exhausted. So I really appreciate all of the support. Thank you so much.
I have a question for you. I represent an organization called Community Care Behavioral Health. So we assist a lot of people who are navigating behavioral health challenges. And so one of the things is we help families that have, children with autism. As far as coordination of care there, what type of supports did you have for your siblings when you were experiencing homelessness?
That is a very good question. That's a very good question, actually. And I think that's definitely something that people have to talk about more, is students with autism, just because for them, like my sister, behaviorally, she took a little longer to develop. So it was hard for her as far as being in social situations, and they couldn't really understand the full grasp of what was going on. So like when it comes to that, I definitely feel as though taking time to talk to them one-on-one is a really big deal. Having her in class with other students, she was fine, but she had some difficulty when it came to class and focusing, or being able to interact with students and teachers. And there were times when teachers didn't know how to interact with her, or they weren't willing to spend the time that they were supposed to. She had, I think it was a IEP or something like that. I forgot what it's called, but she had one of those, and it told them exactly what she needed, and they didn't heed that. So because they didn't heed that, she wasn't getting the extra support in the classroom that she needed, and it made it difficult for her to be able to function in that environment. So my parents had to constantly go to the school and speak to the administrators so that they can actually do what was in her IEP, and that was taking her out of class and like administering tests to her individually, or doing like a check-in on her in the middle of the class to make sure that she's okay with everything. So I would definitely say heeding those IEPs and listening to the parents as well, and maybe building a rapport with them, because that's very important. Parents and teachers should definitely work hand in hand when it comes to what their children need when they have special needs, because that's the only way that that would be able to work, is being on the same accord, so the child gets support both at home and at school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you very much. I do want to be somewhat mindful of the time, and so what I would like to do now is I would still encourage, if people have questions for Shanice, to continue to type them in the chat, but I think we next have a video, and so whoever's running it on that end, and if we want to go ahead and move along with that, and then Shanice, if you are able to stick around, I would be especially interested in questions or feedback you would have after this.
Thank you so much to Shanice and her willingness to share, and thank you for just the responses in the chat and amongst the panelists. I could see your faces, and it was lovely. I have to apologize because I was so nervous initially. I had some additional slides. Again, just want to stress that this is possible because we have worked in collaboration. Our wonderful partners that came together back in February. I want to be mindful of time, but please take a look and you know, say thank you to them as if you're part of those agencies or you come across them. I want to just remind people as they're kind of coming in and out that on Friday it's our Red Shirt Day. That's across the nation, I think, but certainly in our area, to wear your red shirt, to honor I Will Be Your Voice, and help amplify the voice for those that are experiencing homelessness and or hunger. So Friday, Red Shirt Day. The virtual sleep out is also on Friday. There's information on the website. If you go to Friends and Neighbors, that organization has taken on just really helping to share that virtual event to support Covenant Youth Home. I'm sorry, Covenant House. Am I saying that right? Oh my gosh. Okay, so we now have the video from our wonderful Joyce Santiago. Please let me know that the volume is good on this. Can everybody see it? Can you guys see it? Yes? Good. Awesome. We're rocking and rolling.
I'm Joyce Santiago. I'm the Executive Director for Mercury Housing Group. We are a housing agency that has been in existence for 49 years. Mercury Housing Group has a passion for affordable housing. I too have a passion. Many people don't know that when I came back to the organization in 2006,
Dawn, the volume went down.
in York, a group of folks got together because they saw the problems with things like redlining, so that people couldn't get access to the same housing like everyone else. It caused segregated communities. There also was issues with affordability, and on top of that, all that race tension. So a group of people in York got together and talked about the important needs in the community at that time, and of course, one of them being housing. And so they formed our organization to help deal with that. So I'd say one of the big historical challenges would be redlining, people having access to their fair share. Now, and then as well, but definitely now, a big challenge is affordability. There's a lot of housing that, yeah, sure, people might say, yeah, there's housing here, you know, you can rent this, but can I afford it? That's a big challenge. One of the main issues now, because we're going through COVID, going through a major pandemic, and a lot of companies are not doing as well financially as they were. So people are losing their jobs, they're losing income, and it's very difficult to get rent paid. And as we approach the end of December, there's going to be limited amounts of funding available to assist people with rent. And so we're going to have a problem in not just York County, all across America. What do we do as a community with a whole bunch of people that don't have anywhere to go? Yes, we are a housing organization, but we don't have enough stock. As a community, we don't have enough stock. And so we have to get together now to come up with a plan to help people. There's going to be a serious challenge, already a challenge for people who truly want to pay their rent, truly want to keep their housing. They want to provide a stable place for themselves and their families, but it's a real challenge because of decreasing income. I would say affordability. That was a problem before, it's a problem now. And then healthy housing, not just in the unit that they're living in, but also the community, the immediate area that's around their home. So inside their home, we have the challenges of people seeing, like, let's just use this for example. We do home visits as a criteria before we move anybody in. They have to pass our home visit with part of a background check. And some of the things we see are just not right. And I'm talking anything from mold that is big as, that looks like little trees because the mushroom is growing, coming out of the walls, and or big holes in the floor, conditions that no one should have to live in. So that's inside the home. And of course, if your home is not healthy, you're going to have a whole lot of health conditions and everything else. And then also the environment, what's nearby their home is not always the best, you know, depending on what kind of activities that are going on, that is not a healthy environment. So that's where I say the healthiness part of it is a challenge. I encourage all folks living in negative situations where the home is unhealthy to make the call. Make the call to your local municipality, because even if you don't know the exact number or the person you're supposed to talk to, hopefully someone in your municipality can direct you to the right person. No one should live in substandard housing. You have that right, you pay rent, your home should be healthy. First thing that I would say is you can do it. You can get out of the struggle. Be committed. And I say that because I've been in that situation. You know, not many people know that when, I'm just going to use me for example, and there's no shame for me, but when I was in high school, I was one of those homeless students in my senior year that people didn't realize was homeless. The situation for me at home was not one that was good, so I moved out on my own and I kind of bounced around from place to place, you know, just to find a place to lay my head, get some food, that kind of thing. But you can do it as long as you put your mind to it, keep telling yourself, you know, I may be in this situation, but this situation doesn't control me. You can get out of it. You can do it. Oh, well, I can tell you that when people say that, they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. You know, there was a time in my life where I was a struggling single parent, and I was going to school and I was working 4 jobs. And so I struggled. You know, I had good friends in my corner helping me out. So I might have, you know, had to figure out, okay, what bill am I going to pay this month in addition to my rent to make sure that I still keep my place. You know, do I pay rent? Do I pay med ed, what is it that I do take? And so even if I talk to people and they might at the time look at me like, well, you're just not trying hard enough, and I'm looking at them like, are you kidding me? I'm doing everything that I can. Just, I don't necessarily have a silver spoon, but you just can't assume what people are doing. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Never assume because somebody has a cell phone or might be getting their nails done that they're wasting their money. That's not necessarily the case. Someone could have took that person on a shopping spree and got their nails done for them as a gift, or someone could have just bought that cell phone for that person to get them through their struggle. So don't assume that people are wasting their money and not trying to do what they need to do to get out of their struggle. We need to be more sympathetic, more human, and help our fellow man. I would say that our families are strong. When you, let's just say, using somebody who's single, raising children, and they're doing everything they got to do to raise their children, to provide a healthy home for those children, that's a strong person. That's an extremely strong person, and I don't care if they're male or they're female. They're doing everything in their power to make sure everything is stable, no matter what is thrown at them. So even if that means they have less income this week or they have not enough food for this week, but they still keep persevering, that's a strong family. And York County is full of them. I guess the first thing I would say would be advocacy. So if we see that conditions are not right for people, your fellow neighbor, your fellow human being, so you see that, you're aware of it, even if you don't know that person, you can still make that call on behalf of that person, your fellow man, and advocate for better conditions for people. Advocate so that we could be a stronger community, a stronger York County, instead of just not being critical, but saying that you're just thinking of yourself. Let's help each other and advocate for better conditions, better communities, better housing, just better life in general. I think it is wonderful, awesome, fantastic. I can't say enough words about the York County Coalition on Homelessness and all of their partners that are truly trying to make York County a better place for everyone, making sure everybody has a home or a place to stay. I think it's phenomenal. And even in light of COVID-19, it just makes it that much more impactful. I know that that coalition has been doing things way before COVID-19, but with COVID-19 being, upon us now, it is so good to know that there are other people that are very thoughtful and concerned about their fellow neighbor.
Thank you so much to Joyce and to her organization, her willingness to fit us into her schedule so that she can share her story. Again, just speaks to the generosity that that is present in York County, and just makes me just love our community so much more. So I'm going to mute myself, and we are going to shift. Oh, I'm so sorry. I clicked.
Real quick though, before we shift to Annie, I do want to say if in 1 minute or less, if there were any initial reactions to that video among the panelists. I saw that Erica in chat shared an experience and just an affirmation that people that aren't going through rough times don't seem to understand the full impact and how frustrating it can be to people assuming you're just not trying hard enough or don't understand the issues. So if there's any in 1 minute or less reactions to that video before we move on.
Yeah, I would say what she said was absolutely true. When it comes to people not really having enough empathy, my parents were blamed a lot for what we were going through, and people just assumed they weren't doing anything when it was quite the opposite. So that was a really relative point. And with COVID hitting, and there's so many organizations that have been hit and have been struggling to really provide the resources that they're trying to provide, people also have to be aware of that as well. Because sometimes it's always about give me, I need this, which is true. But at the same time, we have to understand that organizations are actually having a very difficult time meeting those needs for what they're trying to do. So sympathy and empathy is two things that's very, very crucial in the situation.
All right. Thank you very much. And now I think we're ready for Annie Clark to share. Take it away. I want to upstage.
Well, first off, I want to thank the coalition for allowing me to speak on one of my favorite topics, which is the wellness connection in all aspects. I've been an educator for 21 years and a resident of York City my entire life. You know that my mission statement is I work for the children of York. And that has taken on many different forms. One, of course, through education. Years ago, about 12 years ago, we started to really talk about wellness in regards to food disparity. And now I find that it's very interesting that we're speaking about wellness in regards to housing. And so one of the projects that we're going to be working on here in the near future in the West End is called the Hope Project Rising, which is definitely true, and is going to talk about some of that. So I wanted to really share, like, how did we get on the journey to change what learning looked like and what living looked like for students. I was thinking when Shanice was speaking, and I'm so glad she was here to do such an eloquent job on behalf of the children of York. Because, I mean, when you hear her story, you're really hearing hundreds of children who are in that exact situation today. You know, there's children right now. We have 40 families at the hotel who have no transportation, and we had to drive food to them. We have children who, you know, thousands of children probably right now in New York City who could potentially be homeless in the next few months, which will be the coldest months. We have shelters that will not take entire families. So the need is real. And now really, you know, for me, it's all about solution. So I'd like to talk to you about how did we get there? And the first thing we always ask anyone who is involved in our organization or even in the West End is, what do you need? It's a simple question, but it's an important question. Many times what I have found has been the gap in York is that we assume what people need and we start to provide that. And so we see a lot of duplication of services, especially around wellness, and yet we don't have people getting well. So I think the first thing is to really always stop and say, what do you need? And don't assume that you know what a student needs or that mother needs or that father needs or the grandparent needs just because you've read that somewhere. And really, sometimes our families don't know what they need, and not assuming because they're not asking means that there's not truly a need. So that was really the first question we asked ourselves about 12 years ago is what did we need as an organization to move learning forward? We started by researching different theories, and why this is so important is you really have to know what you believe, where you're starting from, what the foundation is. We looked at Maslow's higher order of needs, and we still use it. Can you go back for just a minute, Dawn? I'm sorry. Thank you. And so when we looked at Maslow's higher order of needs, what we decided to do was we were going to start as an organization meeting every one of those needs. And if we couldn't connect a program or a thought to that need, it wasn't for us. And one of the things we say is if it's good for children, it's good for us. So what is that very first need? Well, the very first need that any human being needs is food. And so that was a big gap in York about 12 years ago. And I think most of you know this, is that there wasn't fresh food. And the one city grocery store we had closed. And we're still sort of battling that. Our markets didn't take food stamps. And why is this so important is that this is all the things that lead to homelessness. It doesn't start by being homeless in many cases. It starts where there's a food insecurity, there is a health insecurity, there is some type of insecurity, educational insecurity that is causing that and putting that person right on the tipping point from being sort of surviving to not. So that was the biggest need that we saw first. And then it became the other things like safety. Well, safety is by having a home, probably most important is safety, is having a home. But in addition to that, it's the streets that we walk on, it's where we play, it's where we work. It's where we feel safe, and that could be on our way to and from school or in our schools. Then looking at that belonging, many times, I mean, I think one of the great things that Shanice said, and I'm going to have to call Lisa Albright and Community in Schools and give them kudos today, is she had belonging in her organization. York City School District in York High gave her that belonging that she needed to know she really wasn't alone, and she had invested relationships in people who were concerned about her, and all of our organizations need to do that. And then, of course, is that esteem, which is that feeling of accomplishment. So even though you may be, or even though our students or our clients may be in a homeless situation, that doesn't mean that there can't be accomplishments. And it doesn't mean that that isn't what we should be. We should be pointing out every little accomplishment, because each one of those becomes a stepping stool to where that person is going. Can you go to the next slide? I don't think that we can ever not speak enough about trauma and the prevention of trauma. I mean, of course, if someone is in that center picture right there of the car accident, you know, there's really, you can't prevent that. Accidents are going to happen, and that's going to create that trauma that may cause that person to get to homelessness or some insecurities. But most of the trauma that our residents in York are facing are traumas that could be prevented if we were really looking at that and starting right from where they are. So I was looking at some research, and the number one reason people become homeless is family conflict. It's actually 25%, and that's as of the Benevolent Society. So I want you to think about that for a minute, that family conflict is the reason, the number one reason that people become homeless. And I really wouldn't have thought it was that. I might have went with addiction, which is number two. So when you're looking at that role that trauma plays, that begins very young. And there's that famous quote that says, you know, it's easier to prevent a broken child than to fix a broken man. Well, it's perfectly true. But that was one of the reasons that our schools play such an incredible, you know, incredible safety for our students. And COVID really brought that out. And I think that you could see that schools did one of two things. Schools in York either pushed in harder during COVID, or they completely stepped back out. And in the communities where the schools stayed open, and I don't mean physically to students, because we didn't stay physically open to students, but we continued to feed and provide toothpaste and toothbrush and toilet paper and the essentials that our, you know, residents could not get, created a situation where there was at least those basic needs were being met. When we look at our schools, a lot of times they provide the mental health that our students need, and even their families need. Like if you have mental health in your school, the entire family can come. Lack of support. One of the things I would ask the organizations to do is really take that holistic approach to supporting the entire family. Yes, the students attend Lincoln, but really it's the entire family that is so critical to the well-being and really being that place. Genetic needs, making sure that we have healthcare is so important. Dental, there was so many students who did not get their dental checkups last year when COVID occurred, because they get those dental checkups at school. They didn't get their physicals because those occur at school. Looking at life stressors, last month we gave out 1,000 boxes of food, and we probably could have given out 1,000 more. And really understanding that people are choosing between eating and their rent, right? Gas in the car or eating. And so we really have to begin to work together, just like this, you know, coalition is working together to bring awareness and understanding that everybody should have a seat at the table. And then looking at those mental health, you know, issues, and that we still need to do more work in that. And there's definitely a shortage in that care. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. One of the things that I was thinking about was the impact on health and homelessness, and then homelessness on health. So what is the definition of health? And I really like this one, is that it is that balance of purpose, positivity, nutrition, rest, and exercise. I think that we can all agree that if you were in a homeless situation, probably all of these things are at a deficit, right? You're not getting the proper rest. You may be getting exercise just because you're constantly moving around, but not really the exercise you want. You're definitely not getting the nutrition you need, which, you know, affects your brain. Small children need to eat every 2 hours for their brains to work on their optimal level. So you can imagine that a family who is homeless, that's not going to be at the top priority. And so that child's not coming to school able to learn as they would be if they had that, you know, breakfast in the morning. We'd provide that at schools, and I think most do now. And really the purpose, it is so hard to think about what's coming next when you're in survival mode. And it's really hard to talk about purpose and belonging when you're in that place. So I found that when there is homelessness, it doubles every health issue. So it doubles heart disease is doubled in homeless people, so is diabetes, and every major illness is doubled the whole way down through when someone becomes homeless. In some cases, the health issue can create the homelessness, but in more times, it's the homelessness that's creating the health issues and doubling that for people, which is really, really very sad. And once you're ill, it's almost impossible to work, and it would be almost impossible to get off the streets. And it's really sad. That makes me very sad too. Is that my last slide? Okay, and resiliency. I think that resiliency is so key. I was going to also include the word grit. One of the things, I don't think that any person should ever apologize, especially someone coming up in a rough situation, should ever apologize for their grit or their strength or their resiliency. I would say to all of the listeners, we really need to find that resiliency, and we need to teach that resiliency from young children on. I mean, one of the things that I always say is that leadership is recognized at a very young age. We call them cubs. When they come in at 5 years old, we call them cubs. But truthfully, you will see a student who walks down the hallway at 5 years old with great purpose in the way that they walk. Well, that student needs to have that emphasized. And some of the things that we need to do to make sure that that student can be that best version of them is, if they come to our schools, our organizations, and their clothes are dirty, you need to clean those clothes. You need to have backup clothing. I love our community. Everything I've ever asked for has come through. And that's been a wonderful experience for me as an educator and as a community leader. Make sure that students looking good, feeling good. We have toothbrushes here, combs here, soap here, whatever they need to go to the restroom, to feel their best version of themselves, get to class, and then find what they're good at. And every student, I've never found a student who doesn't want to do well in school. And schools really can be the key to turning this around. I said that I wrote in my book, The Journey of Hope, that if every educator today, and this is everybody who's listening, decided that you would do one thing different to change York or your community if you're not from York, and you did that every day for the next year, the outcomes would be absolutely positively amazing. They'd be measurable. They'd be something that we could absolutely look at and say, hey, this made a difference. And so I'm going to encourage you to come back to that very first question is, what do people need? But the second question that you should be asking yourself is, what can I do? And you should lead from where you are. No amount of money is going to make you get started. I want to say this, I always say this when I'm presenting, is that every program that I've ever built, I've had zero money to build it. And I want people to know that, because money follows good work, and you don't need money to get started. What you really need is a belief that, one, you can change the outcome, and two, you are the one called to change the outcome. So York, in our history, for as good and bad as it is, the one thing I can say about York is we do have grit. And I want to say that we are a community of resilience, and we continue to rise. So I see a lot of the comments, and I want to thank you. I want to just thank our community for this great work. I want to thank the coalition. I was luckily at that first meeting in February, and to see this amazing program that you have put together, and the outcomes that you're going to change for our residents makes me proud to say that I am from York, and I'm part of the team. I'll be happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
First off, thank you, Annie. Before we get to questions, I just wanted to extend a big thank you to Shanice. I see that she needs to step out, and I just wanted to thank her for sharing her story and being just offering to be a good resource as well. So thank you for your story. Thank you for your time this morning. I know that we've hit 10 o'clock right now, and so a number of people may need to start stepping out. And so in order to speed things along, first off, thank you again, Shanice. We really appreciate you being here. And second,
Thank you.
uh, I know that we have two more, well, a video and another panelist. So if you don't mind, Annie, I'd like to get to those first, and then we can take some questions at the end for people that are still sticking around, and we can have a little bit of conversation at that point. So thank you for sharing. And I think at this point, we're prepared for a video from Lisa.
No,
Is that correct?
I apologize, Mike. Reverend Mike, I did not give you an update. We don't have a video from Lisa. We will bring Lisa Kennedy in on another session. She's amazing, but we will shift over to Kim.
There we go. Well, I'm Kim Kreinock. I also work with Joyce Santiago at York Area Housing Group. And there were some things that Shanice said, and I wish she was here to hear this, that she talked about visible homelessness and then the couch surfing alternative where maybe you don't even realize that you are homeless. And the realization that there's so many invisible homeless in our community who are in that sort of circumstance. What I want to say to everyone is please don't hesitate to reach out for help. There is help out there. The 211 phone number is a good opportunity to call and just seek initial stepping stone to help. A thing broke my heart that Shanice said was that they were able to find a house to live in, but that it had no running water. Just because something fits in your budget doesn't make it affordable housing. What the company that I am affiliated with, we offer quality, affordable housing. It's based on a program through Housing and Urban Development. There's a number of programs through Housing and Urban Development known as HUD, and also the U.S. Department of Agriculture offers rural development housing opportunities for both families and elderly and disabled specific projects for those individuals. Oftentimes, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the maybe acronyms and projects and things that people hear about. A lot of times you'll hear Section 8. Well, Section 8 has a variety of forms. There's what's called Project Section 8. I was the property manager for a project Section 8 in Stewartstown, Pennsylvania. It was a family project, which means we offered 1, 2, and 3 bedroom homes. We offered a program where your rent was based on 30% of your adjusted income. There are certain allowances. There's a lot of things that go into it, so I can't explain the whole thing here. But we would get to an adjusted income, multiply that by 30%, then divide by 12. That becomes your monthly rent. Some projects have a utility allowance if it has its own heating and cooling in the unit itself. Sometimes it's all included if it's in a larger building where there's one system serving everyone. You then are the HUD or Housing Urban Development or the other organization that may be funding the project will pay a portion of the rent, and the resident pays that other 30%. One super gigantic security blanket is that, you have a family that both parents are working, which leaves the kids, now you need childcare. Well, if you're in a circumstance, you may be able to let one of those parents stay home with the kids because your rent is based solely on the income that your family generates. Next worst thing that happens is someone loses their job. Well, the beauty of that is that if you lose your job and your income decreases, you're in a position where your rent is recalculated immediately, and it's once again based on 30% of your adjusted income. If no one in the household is working, well, we can do the math and we can see what, if there's no income, 30% of zero becomes zero. So that's a big safety blanket. There's opportunities for one parent to remain home and stay with the kids, which is super important. I know a lot of times there are households that they were fortunate enough, they felt they were so fortunate to find housing. And in one particular instance, we do go for home visits. That's cleanliness, sanitary, that sort of thing is part of the HUD program. And I went for a home visit at one particular individual's home. There were children, and the door didn't even lock. And some of the things she showed me in that house were just unbelievable, but that's what she could afford, and she was happy to have that. She got moved into my project, and it wasn't long later, I happened to pass by where she lived, and I saw that big X on the door, which means the city has marked it for condemnation. And I went by that property about 2 weeks ago, and it's not there anymore. So, I mean, she literally was living in a house that it was a shelter, and that's it. It was a cover from the weather, and that was about it. You'll also hear people talk about having a voucher. A voucher is also a HUD program. Now, certain circumstances, you have a project. If it's a HUD project like I had, it meant that everybody gets on a waiting list. Everybody works through the same process. When your name comes to the top, you get called for an interview. Ultimately, you get housed. In a voucher program, that means that the individual has been granted a voucher. That voucher sticks with the person. In a project, it sticks with the real estate. In a voucher, it sticks with the person. The person could, in theory, take that voucher anywhere to use toward their rent. That doesn't always work, as great as it sounds, because there's a lot of landlords that aren't interested in accepting the voucher, because that requires them to go through inspections and things like that they're not particularly eager to embrace or get involved in. There are a number of different programs within both HUD and some of the others. We also have a program called single room occupancies. That's probably the closest to helping homelessness, but it's only a one room stepping stone. And even with that, it's still a waiting list. So the really biggest and most unfortunate thing is, while it sounds great that there's these projects out there to help people, and there's waiting lists. My one location, my family project, seriously, there is a waiting list where I recently housed a person who had been waiting for a one-bedroom apartment for over 3 years. So if you're homeless, you don't have that kind of time. But I still encourage everybody, get on the list. Your name will eventually come up, but there's tenacity, there's resilience, there's waiting, there's a lot of things involved, because the need just so significantly outweighs the supply. And the thing that just the average person can do to try to help is support organizations like ours that do try to face this issue head on, and just advocate for the counties and for other organizations that can assess funds to the housing need, because it's tremendous. It was there well before COVID. It's been there for years. We'd love to say it's just going to be stamped out, but it's going to take a lot to make that happen. We're doing everything that we can, and we want to do more. We just need everybody's help for that. If I guess if anybody has any questions, I sort of veered off my script there with some of the things that other people said this morning that I wanted to circle back on. But it's applications for our housing is available at our website. You can visit any of our locations and pick up an application. If you have any questions, you can call us. We're happy to, the happiest thing for us is to get someone in a home. So if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So there's a question here.
Okay.
What if a client lost their Section 8 voucher due to not being able to pay rent during COVID and were evicted? Can they reapply?
You can always reapply because, like I said, you may be in a situation. COVID's thrown a curveball into everything, and I would suggest that people always seek to reapply. Now, I can't specifically speak to the voucher program because I'm not involved in that, but from a project program like I have, time passes. You have, if you have proof that it was COVID related, absolutely, you should always reapply. The worst possible thing that could happen is that person, when your name comes to the top, says, you know what, because of a certain scenario, we're unable to house you. But if you have documentation indicating that, it's very very likely that you should continue on and start over. There's going to be a lot of people, unfortunately, that face homelessness as a result of the COVID circumstance.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate.
To respond to that, Kim, the latest research I've seen indicates we're talking millions and millions. I've seen estimates ranging anywhere from 10 to 40 million people that might lose their homes, especially once the moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent expires. And I can tell you, as I said before, not even with that moratorium in place, people are still being evicted.
Yes,
because landlords are able to find ways, right? It only is for non-payment of rent. So if you're on a month-to-month, they can just say we're not going to renew.
Right.
If they can find other excuses to evict you that aren't technically non-payment of rent, or they can just try and jam it through and hope that you aren't aware that you have that right. And a lot of the judges are interpreting it that if they tell you have that right, that's prejudicial against the plaintiffs, and so they're choosing not to tell you about that right. So there's lots of steps along the way there too. So it's
I mean, we try to help everybody with forms. We try to educate people, even our own tenants, if we were in a circumstance where we had a situation where someone was facing an eviction, because there is a rent contract and there are things that you need to abide by, not just rent payment, but there are other things you have to, follow the rules and not put other people in jeopardy and that sort of thing that could still and would still lead to an eviction process. But what you had said earlier, Reverend Mike, with regard to that waiver, that will hold in a non-payment circumstance, that would give people that security of a time extension with regard to non-payment due or eviction due to non-payment. So, yeah, unfortunately, those circumstances are, we got a big storm ahead of us.
Yeah, I think CNN just had an article yesterday, I believe, with their projections on kind of where the situation's looking, and that's not even taking into account people that are going to have once the mortgage moratoriums expire,
Yeah.
then that's going to compound things.
Yeah. The homelessness from a different angle.
There was another question of, is there, I did post the link to the application from the
Okay,
York
good.
Housing Group.
Thanks.
Is there a direct link to apply for Section 8 housing online?
For Section 8 voucher program.
Yes.
Now, that's an interesting thing because the Section 8 voucher program is administered through the York Housing Authority, which is a public housing agency. It's coincidental that our name sounds very much like that, York Area Housing Group. We are a private nonprofit entity that supports housing in the affordable housing sector. If people are interested in the voucher program, they should seek that information from the housing authority. I know that they go through cycles where they make applications available. And I can't speak to what their waiting list looks like, but I know that it's lengthy. And now we keep our waiting lists open. At this point, we've kept them open all the time. I think the housing authority will close those periodically just due to volume. But yeah, I see there was a section there that popped up on the chat about with a link, I think, to the voucher program that Dawn put on there.
Mhm.
So
I think another important thing to note, I did have Kelly, you know, from the coalition speak, excuse me, to providers last week. And one of the things she reiterated is, if you're on a waiting list, just stay on the waiting list.
yes, please stay on the waiting list because with our locations, once a year, we'll go through what's called a purge, and we'll send a letter out to every person on our list, giving them a 2-week time frame to respond and say, yeah, we want to stay on the list. No, we don't want to stay on the list. We found housing. Another really important thing is if you're on any list or if you move, please tell the person who is in charge of that list that you have moved or that you have changed your phone number, because sometimes the way we contact people is with a telephone. And I can't tell you the number of times I've hit, hi, it's so-and-so. The mailbox has never been set up. Please call another time. And, you know, if you're on a list and housing is so important, please set your mailbox up and hope for the call to come, because it eventually will. So, you know, keep whoever's list you're on, keep that up to date so that they can contact you when your time comes.
Thank you. Another question that did arise and is housing, a need to change housing situations because of medical needs. So that's something that one of our participants is asking if that's something that your organization, you know, supports. I will say, just as a little caveat, I can only speak to those, you know, that I serve, which are medical assistant recipients. I would encourage in those situations to contact the individual's insurance, especially, you know, the special needs units that are available through the insurance plans, because there is service coordinators working behind the scenes that can kind of help link up to make sure someone can stay in their community. And then again, if there are behavioral health needs and physical health needs, you know, to bring in both entities.
Yeah, and that's important. One thing I would say, not every location has a service coordinator. Like the 2 of the locations that I managed, I did not have, because we simply weren't big enough. We do have service coordinators at our Kingston House location in West York. It also has a sister location called Cloverfield in West Manchester Township that is elderly. There is a service coordinator for both of those locations. We have a property called Delphia House that includes a service coordinator. I had a location in Dillsburg called Green Meadow. I had a location in Stewartstown called Highland Manor, which was the family project. And we do not have service coordinators at those locations due to the small size that we are. One thing, now that came up, it's a very sad and heartbreaking thing that I know that in some of our locations, we do have people who really aren't capable of living on their own. But, and you know, I even had a tenant say, give a reference to someone else who said, "Oh, I'm in assisted living," and then the person called for an application. It's like, oh my goodness, no, that we're not assisted living. We're independent housing, but they were just happy to have the assistance with the rent payment. But you know, families or individuals really need to be sure they know what they're applying for, because everything that we have is independent living, and I know there have been circumstances where I had a person move in and then they asked like could I give them a menu for the meals, and I couldn't, because we don't offer that service. So sometimes even the folks that are applying don't realize, they're so happy that their name came up that thank God there's other services out there that we can say, oh, well, we can't make you a meal, but here's Meals on Wheels, here's the aging, here's the community center, and get them set up that way. But yeah, there's a lot of people with a lot of need. There's just a lot of need, and it transcends all age groups, from youth to people in their 90s and who need help every day, and they're still making it go on their own. And it's very sad sometimes, but we help as many as we can.
Kim, I think you're so beautifully echoing Joyce's, sentiment in terms of, huge element of the solution is advocacy and an understanding that we are in relation with our fellow human, and it's those connections that will link us arm in arm. We don't all have the same strengths. We're not intended to, but we're intended to kind of fit together and become, superheroes in that connection and listening and being aware. It's all of those things, and those are messy. There's not a checkbox necessarily that you can have that makes it all work together, but it's listening, and it's trying things out, and it's working together. I thank you so much for being willing to share. You gave us some really tangible information that we've already had requests, and we will include that with the slide deck that will post in the next within 48 hours. Reverend Mike, we're bumping up to 10:25. Is there anything you wanted to wrap us up with? And I start to just kind of finish up our housekeeping.
Yeah, I was noticing that too, and I just wanted to kind of provide maybe each of our panelists 1 minute for any closing thoughts with regards to what we've talked about this morning, and then 1 minute for last minute spiel that's important to you, and then we'll turn it back over to Dawn for any final housekeeping items that we need to address. So. Kim, I'm going to kind of go in reverse order of how we presented. So since you're most recent, do you have about a minute here? Any last minute thoughts that you wanted to
Well,
share?
I'll make it quick. I just think the key is to don't give up. Get your name on lists. Stay on the list. Ask for help. Sometimes we don't have all the answers, but as Dawn said, if we have a coordinated effort of people who say, you know what, I don't think I can help it, but I think I know someone who might be able to help you. That's like super important. And the camaraderie and just reaching out, networking, doing things like this, it's like super important, and it's going to help everybody in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Annie, we did notice that we did not have a chance to come back to you for questions. So in the interest of fairness, if someone did have a question, I want to maybe allow you a chance to address if there was a question in chat for Annie that we perhaps missed. Otherwise, give you a little bit extra time to make a little bit of a point about what your kind of maybe last minute and a half thoughts would be. Lauren,
I
were there
would,
any questions directed
okay,
towards her specifically?
Sure.
thank,
Annie, somebody brought up a really good point about those that may be more vocal of asking for help in comparison to those that, there's a lot of nonverbal cues. And maybe if you can kind of speak to a little bit about like best practices or some of those nonverbal cues that you might see to help trigger, for
mhm.
people to lean into those uncomfortable conversations.
I really appreciate that. In the children, we always look for any student that looks a little disheveled. That always gives us a cue that something different is happening in the house. And in parents, we always are looking for the parent who is probably maybe more argumentative about something that's going on. And that normally is a cue that there's something larger going on, and it's easy to attack the school and to sort of get some of that out. So we allow parents to just go ahead and vent. And sometimes, it's full with a lot of adjectives and we just let it go just because we want to make sure that we let the parent get it the whole way out so that we can say, hey, what's really going on here? And what can we do to help you? Myself and Miss Day, Salita Day, she's part of the group. We've started to build a wellness center at one of our locations, our new location at 459. So I would just encourage anybody that's on the call who's interested in doing wellness work to reach out to myself or to Ms. Salita Day, because we really want to stay in those conversations. We want to prepare for our residents who may go homeless, who may need additional support, and that's what the Wellness Center is for.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Anne.
Thank you.
Annie. Yeah, and I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here this morning to help hear some of the stories and the conversation that we've been sharing in. Thank you very much for pulling this all together, Dawn, and everyone else that's been working behind the scenes. I think this is a very helpful and fruitful panel this morning, and I look forward to seeing where things go from here.
Thank you so much, Reverend Mike, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you to Kelly Bletchertass and Allie Smith, who have been just incredible in stepping up during some of their most busy time as they are preparing for the cold weather. Just to wrap up, definitely want to share some events that are coming up. We have Tanisha Wilkes, who has put together an incredible event for November 22nd in the community over at Union Lutheran. That information is on our website. We, of course, have our Red Shirt Day on Friday. Please wear it. Post to the hashtag I will be your voice. The virtual sleep out. And then the next meeting for the York County Coalition on Homelessness is typically the 4th Thursday of the month, but with the holidays, it's shifting, I think, for December and this month to the 3rd. The next one would be December 17th. I think I have that right. I was typing that at midnight last night. Check me if I'm wrong. I'll fix it on the slide. And then the next meeting for this particular subcommittee, we meet the first Tuesday of every month at 8:30. We will meet via Zoom, and we will focus on debriefing from the conference and what our next steps are. If you would like to be included on that, just simply email us or send an email to Allie, and we can get you on those distribution lists. We appreciate your feedback. It's so necessary to hear your voice. You have our web page for today that the links are there. We did post a link in the chat. And here is the website for it if you haven't already gone there. And just please stay tuned. Tomorrow's session is the impact on mental health. We have Sonia Pizzi, who is our moderator, with the amazing Cindy Richards, Dr. George Fitch, and Kara Vojacek. I am really hoping I pronounced Kara's name right. I think we're going to continue to have a really wonderful conversation. This has been recorded. It will be posted on Facebook this evening, and we will have links to the video on the website within the next 48 hours. Again, just thank you. So much love and appreciation for everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And if you don't join us, for one reason or another during the rest of the week, I hope you just have a warm and blessed Thanksgiving. Be well, be safe, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.